Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known. It is Friday, July 22nd, 2022. This morning, a very, very special presentation led by Defender Network's Aswad Walker, who will be joined by NNPA journalist Barrington Salmon and Washington Informer reporter James Wright, along with two very special guests discussing the case of Darius Duron Elam, a former Texas Southern University student who has spent 37 years in prison, though no evidence exists that ties him to the crime for which he was convicted. But first, a couple of headlines to start your weekend. President Biden has tested positive for COVID, and although he's fully vaccinated and boosted, and doctors believe he'll be fine, it's just another setback for a president whom Republicans have attacked as being too old, too slow, and simply not up to task. Also, former Minneapolis police officer Thomas Lane was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison in a federal court on Thursday morning for violating George Floyd's civil rights. Lane, who is 39 years old, is one of 3 former Minneapolis police officers who were convicted earlier this year of depriving Floyd of his right to medical care as the handcuffed, unarmed Black man was pinned under the knee of their senior officer, Derek Chauvin, for more than 9.5 minutes on May 25th, 2020. Floyd's videotaped killing in Minneapolis sparked anti-racism protests and calls for police reform across the United States and around the world. Prosecutors had asked U.S. District Judge Paul Magnuson to sentence Lane between 5.25 to 6.5 years in prison, while Lane's attorney had asked for 2.25 years. Also, the January 6th hearings continued last night with more damaging information against former President Donald Trump. The January 6th committee showed how Donald Trump refused for hours to take any action to stop the Capitol attack, dismissing pleas from White House officials. Witnesses testified that as a mob stormed the Capitol, members of Mike Pence's security detail contacted family members to say goodbye. In outtakes from a video addressed the day after the riot, Trump refused to say that the election was over. Last night's hearing was the last of the summer, but the committee said it will continue its investigation. Lawmakers on the committee said they were also dealing with a revelation about Secret Service records as it relates to January 6th. A government watchdog previously requested messages sent and received by Secret Service personnel around the time of the attack, but a spokesperson for the agency acknowledged last week that text messages from January 5th and January 6th were deleted after being sought by the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General. Barrington and James is joining first, I see, and we just ran through the headlines. We want to get to our primary topic, but I'm going to give you guys a moment before we get there, to discuss these headlines this morning. Barrington, the ball is in your court.
I'm not surprised that President Biden got COVID. He's been moving around, doing what presidents do. We keep on trying to assume that if it's like a Jedi mind trick, that if we say COVID isn't here, it's gone, but it's not. We keep on reading about the different variants that are presenting themselves, and we really should continue to be wearing masks and taking other precautions and stuff like that. So,
yeah, absolutely. And James, this January 6th committee. I mean, we talked at the top about the officer in the George Floyd case, 2.5 years he'll serve. He was actually Lane was actually the officer who held Floyd's feet down while Chauvin pinned him with his knee in his neck. Is that adequate, James? Will people accept that sentence as adequate?
They shouldn't. He should have 5.5 years that was initially recommended. This man was an accomplice to murder, and that's really what it was. Take away the blue law enforcement cloth, and that's what you have. George Floyd was murdered. He was murdered by Derek Chauvin, and this man was an accomplice to murder. 5.5 years, I think, should be. I think it should be more, but under the circumstances as they were handed, he should have had 5.5 years instead of 2.5 years. Miscarriage of justice.
Well, and we also apparently seeing that it's not it's not dissuading other officers around the country from still participating in what many call the lynching of Black people in particular. Barrington, go ahead.
They're rogues. They are rogues, and they, you know, I think I read something that President Biden is throwing like billions of dollars at police departments. You know, he has made no effort. The Republicans have thwarted every effort to get the George Floyd police reform bill passed. It's a joke, this whole system. And, you know, I've gotten sanctioned on Facebook for saying that they need to burn down the whole system. They need to burn it down and start again.
Because you're gonna get us sanctioned.
Huh?
So now you're gonna get us sanctioned.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry. but, and I mean, the case that we're going to be talking about with the young man who's been in prison for 38 years for a crime that he hasn't committed. This is just indicative of the corruption and the corrosive efforts, the corrosive parts of the criminal so-called justice system. It's got to change. It's got to change.
They say the criminal injustice system, right, Barrington?
Yeah.
And Barrington, you and James, real quick, so we can get to Aswad Walker and his special guest this morning. Real quick, the January 6th committee hearings, we've heard it all now, right? I mean, what's next?
No, we haven't heard it all. I think there's a whole lot more.
Well, we've heard enough, right?
We've heard enough to put the dude under the jail. But what is most frustrating to me is continuing to hear these people, these political officials wringing their hands and
that's 7-second delay, y'all.
Oh no, no, there wasn't anything coming in between there. The political officials who are wringing their hands talking about we've never indicted a president before. We've never done this. Who cares? Because the damage that would be done to this country if this dude is allowed to walk is incalculable.
James, I'm glad that came up. James, let me quickly ask you about Josh Hawley. Break that down for us, James. I mean, we see him with the fist raised. I mean, he's kind of saluting the rioters. But at the same time, they capture him in video running for his life.
Like his hair's on fire.
Yes.
Running for his life instead of running to the protesters who he was supposed to be supporting. You know, these folks are so dripping of hypocrisy. It's a darn shame. Let me say that I think that people like Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz, and others have a lot to account for, really, in the public domain. They don't want to, but they do. But they have to eventually. And whether they are voted out of office as they should be is another question. But they have a lot to account for, and history will ultimately convict them.
It's treason, James.
Well, right. And treason.
They don't deserve to be thrown out. They deserve to be put in jail.
Yeah.
Because they committed treason. They shouldn't even be in the Senate right now.
By every definition, it is treason, and we'll see what Attorney General Merrick Garland, who will have the next to final say if he decides to bring any action. Then, of course, a judge and jury will have the final say. But certainly, we'll see what Merrick Garland will do. They presented this on a platter to him, and as Barrington said, we still haven't heard it all. We've heard enough, but we haven't heard it all. So we'll see in the coming weeks what this committee, who's done a fantastic job. I mean, everything that has come up that people will say, oh, well, what about this? Well, they have an answer for it. And that is a true prosecutor right there. Yeah. He got an answer for everything, and videotape as well as audio tape. So we're going to keep watching that. But as we move on this morning, though, injustices endured by African Americans in the U.S. over the centuries have come in many forms. Few have been more consistent than the incarceration of innocent men and women. This is the claim of individuals dedicated to winning the release and exoneration of Darius Duron Elam, a former Texas Southern University student who has spent the last 37 years in prison, though no evidence, none, exists that ties him to the crime for which he was convicted. Let's bring on, from the Defender Network, Aswad Walker, who has done extensive reporting on this topic. Aswad, welcome again to Let It Be Known.
Yeah, good morning. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And we know you've brought along with you two special guests. Why don't you introduce them, Aswad?
So there's Samuel Elam, who is the brother of Darius Elam, and Tammy Lane Campbell. She is the activist who brought this to my attention. And I know Ms. Campbell and her daughter, Sade, who is, just as much the activist, because I used to cover events for the Defender. So I would be at every event around the city. They're always there. I mean, very civically minded, whether it's dealing with education, business, voting rights. They are up front and in everybody's organization. And so when I got the word from her about this brother who had been wrongly incarcerated, that wasn't the usual conversation that I had with Ms. Campbell. So it just really, really stood out. And what I learned from her was just absolutely disturbing, that the two pieces of evidence, quote unquote evidence, that has this brother locked up for over 30 years is a yellow sheet of notebook paper that we don't know if it still exists or not. And it had his fingerprint on it, but it was his notepad for the classes that he was taking at Texas Southern University. And the other piece of evidence was the testimony of a jailhouse informant who has recanted and said he was paid, he was coerced to give that false testimony in exchange for him not being thrown under the jail for his own crimes. And so that's the only quote unquote evidence for Darius Elam being in jail. And he's in jail for the crime of quote credit card fraud, which was not him. It was a brother that was with him. Even though the people that worked in the business where the credit card fraud took place, they told police officers, it's not Darius, it's not that brother right there, it's this other one. And so he's in jail for 38 years unofficially for the murder of the owner of that credit card. I mean, it's disturbing. It's disturbing piece of evidence upon disturbing piece of evidence upon disturbing piece of evidence. And I learned so much more. I thought I knew the case just by speaking with Ms. Campbell, but when I interviewed Darius at the prison, I learned so much more. But I think she and Samuel Elam can shed way more light on this than I can.
Sure. Well, let's do that. And here you mentioned the credit card fraud. Now, is he in? He's in for murder or for credit card?
What was the
conviction, in other words?
The conviction is not for murder. Murder was thrown out, but he's been in jail for 38 years. I mean,
so he was convicted of what then?
He was convicted of the on the credit card case. When the person who was actually the perpetrator, brother by the name of Clarence Richardson, he was sentenced, I think, 3 to 5 years, and he's done his time and he's been out. He's lived his life, and he's also said emphatically it was not Darius Elam who was involved in this credit card fraud incident. Right. And so
that's why I want the audience to understand that you're talking 37 years, and this is really about a credit card. I mean, someone died, we know, right?
Right.
But this, in his case, this is about a credit card fraud. 37 years. Let's hear from Mr. Elam there, and the activist. What's going on?
Well, do you want to take it, Sam? This is Tammy Lane Campbell. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
what is going on now? We have been fighting this in terms of getting justice for Darius. DNA excludes him as a contributor. The informant has recanted his statement, and we are fighting a system that has kidnapped him and incarcerated him for 37 years. We have put 2 more years on for being in jail. But now we're at the point where Darius has been fighting for his life in this so-called justice system with the writ of mandates that he has filed with the Texas Criminal Court of Appeal in reference to the recanted statement and actual innocence on the DNA. And the original prosecutor, special prosecutor that was appointed, has now been appointed as judge, and her background was somewhat questionable. But now a new DA has been appointed, and what we attempted to do was to get the original Harris County DA to unrecuse their office, because they had recused their office because of a chief of staff that's working with the DA now, Harris County DA, was a court-appointed attorney on Darius' case. And she wasn't able to get the DNA testing done, although she requested it. It was very limited in her involvement, and the DA's office recused the entire office. And so we petitioned the Harris County DA to unrecuse his office, because it was an opportunity for them to come in and do an actual innocent investigation when the prosecutor, the special prosecutor, had been appointed as judge. So a new special prosecutor needed to be assigned, or the DA's office could unrecuse themselves, which they attempted to do. So we are in the, really in a no-win battle for this judge who has decided to not allow the Harris County DA to unrecuse its office.
Yeah, Ms. Campbell, thanks for that. Let me go to Samuel Elam. Samuel, so again, we're trying to wrap our heads around it. First of all, how is your brother doing? Number one, how's he holding up, I should say, and number two, what's the latest as far as attorneys are concerned for you guys? What are your attorneys saying? Is there a hope that they can finally get justice for your brother? You're on mute, Mr. Elam.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. You know, I spoke with Darius probably on yesterday. Right now, what we're looking at, as what Tammy was explaining, you know, the case has taken a turn where we were trying to get the Harris County DA's office to unrecuse themselves and begin the investigation so that they could get the information that's needed.
Mr. Elam, let me, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you have a second device going apparently, and we're hearing a lot of feedback.
I've been hearing that too. I don't know where it's coming from. So what I'm gonna do, let me see if I could. Okay, is that better?
Yes. Thank you. We want everyone to really clearly hear you, and as we think it's important. This is such an important story. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what ended up happening is that the judge has decided to go with another special prosecutor. So he denied Kim Ogg's office the opportunity to unrecuse themselves and begin a investigation on Darius's case. He also has requested until December the 30th before they can get a hearing after that time, after the investigation is over. So the new DA is asking for 6 months since he's new to the case and has to get up to speed. Our side, our attorney, has asked for 90 days. And the judge, he kind of landed at a 5-month point. Because
5 months. I mean, your brother has been in there 37 years. I mean,
exactly.
It seems like they could speed this up a bit. And again, Aswad, you said they threw out murder charges, right? This just to connect this so our audience understand. And you can read a whole lot. Aswad has done some great work at the Defender Network. Go defendernetwork.com. Or you can go to honeybrownhope.org/ Darius Elam and read all of what Aswad has done and even see what he's done, because he's done some videotaped interview with Darius at the prison. But Aswad, so you mentioned that earlier. Just again, so I just want our viewers to be clear. They threw out the murder charges. That's correct.
That's correct.
So what's remaining?
They threw out the murder charges and the credit card abuse charge.
Okay, so what is he in for then at this point?
They have charged him with an aggravated robbery.
Okay, so let's say and certainly he's pleaded. We know he's pleaded not guilty. There's no evidence, but just to say a person is guilty of aggravated robbery, is 37 years what we're doling out in Texas?
Absolutely not. Even in Texas, even in racist, backwards Texas, someone who is convicted of aggravated robbery, they don't stay in prison for 37 years. Actually, not even close to 37 years. So that's why I say he's unofficially in jail for the murder of Richard Bowen. But I'd mentioned earlier that when I actually spoke with Darius Elam at the prison, I learned so much more, because I knew the story of how Richard Bowen, who Elam knew from Texas Southern University, they're both students there.
No, he did. It wasn't Richard Bowen that he knew. It was Clarence.
I'm sorry, Clarence Richardson. Excuse me. And that's really important that you said it, because Darius did not know this person who was killed, but Clarence Richardson, the one who used Bowen's credit card, that was the brother that, I got the story that Clarence asked him to take him to the store to do some shopping and all that. But what I learned from Darius was Darius Elam actually worked at the Galleria. He was literally working that day, and this brother asked him, hey, let's go around, do some shopping. And so that's one thing that just kind of blew my mind. The other is, so on the crime scene where Richard Bowen was killed, I believe he was found on the campus of Rice University parking lot in a truck. And so, any crime scene, you have investigators that scour the scene for evidence. They take photos, they do all that. So two crime scene investigators logged in all the evidence that they saw in the truck, took photos of everything they saw in and around the truck, and no one saw this yellow sheet of notebook paper. Later, another person did the same thing. When they take the truck and then they take the whole thing apart, because they want to make sure they have every piece of evidence possible. Mm-hmm. And so I believe it was a sister who did this investigation. And they have to sign their name to it. They say, this is the evidence that I found, and they all sign their name to it, and none of them found this quote unquote smoking gun yellow sheet of notebook paper until the vehicle was given back to the family of the victim. And then I think it was a fourth person came in and said, oh, look what I found.
And we want to emphasize too that it was a whole sheet of 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. It wasn't a torn piece or, you know, something balled up in the corner.
Right.
It was something that would have been clearly visible, especially by 4 investigators.
Yeah, so let's bring back Barrington Salmon and James Wright. Barrington, so here's some, just break down what they're saying. So here's evidence, some evidence, many supporting Darius and his innocence. There was recanted testimony from Houston Police Department jailhouse informant who was paid $300 and facing a 3 strikes. 3 strikes that means life for a gun probation violation that was later quashed. There was DNA testing on the original items of bullets, shoes, clothing, fingernail clippings, hair, and blood samples, which excluded Darius as a DNA contributor, and found a third unidentified person's DNA under the victim's fingernails, and of course the aforementioned yellow sheet of paper. Barrington, how are you digesting this?
It makes me angry. It makes me angry because, you know, and I hate to say that folks' hands are tied, our hands are tied, but Darius has been punished with 37 years in jail. You know, it's something I say all the time. If you would expect that a judge or the governor or somebody could be petitioned to look at the evidence and to release that Darius, but as Aswad said, we're talking about Texas. So, you know, all we can do is keep on fighting. I didn't even. This is the first time that I'm even hearing about this case, and my next step is that I'm going to be interviewing all of the folks on this show and other people to let people know what's going on, and agitate and make noise. Because the thing is, you know, Stacey, you know, my mantra is if we can't sleep, they're not supposed to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
If we can't sleep, we're supposed to make sure that we haunt their every waking moment, and that's what we got to do.
Yeah, and James, I saw you writing about Governor Abbott. No reason to expect him to chime in at all, right?
No reason to expect him to do anything like that. That would be too much like right, especially for a guy like him. He can't do right for the folks in Uvalde. How do you expect him to do right for pretty much of anything that's not right wing? Let me just say very quickly, Stacey, that I was a student at Prairie View, A&M University at the time that this was occurring. I didn't know about it. Houston was considered to be a very scary place for Black males, in particular with the police. The police were very, very aggressive at that time toward young Black males. And we were warned on Prairie View's campus that if we go into Houston, just to be very careful, because they'll stop you for anything, and they'll just look for a reason to shoot you or kill you in Houston at that time. Also, keep in mind, during that time, Kathy Whitmire was mayor of Houston at that time, and either she was going to or she was about to appoint Lee Brown as the first Black police chief of the Houston police force in Houston. And that caused a great deal of discussion in Houston at that time along racial lines. So there's a backstory to this that's not apparent in terms of this particular case, but there's an atmospheric backstory to this.
Yeah, and Tammy Lane Campbell, we still have the founder of, yes, Tammy. So talk about your organization, Tammy, and how you got wind of this and how you got involved.
Well, we are an organization that promotes civil rights, diversity appreciation, and environmental awareness. And I got involved with Darius' case as a classroom assignment from American Leadership Forum, and also from a request after I had done an op-ed in the Houston Chronicle to visit the facility. And when I visited the facility, what stuck out most to me is that another resident, and I call them resident rather than inmate, shared with me that Darius was innocent. That was, to me, the biggest in terms of recommendation, that you could get the highest recommendation when a fellow inmate say that you're innocent and you don't belong here. So that's how we got involved. And now we're in with Darius in a fight for his freedom, for justice. And we are not going to sit back and not do everything we can. And we appreciate Aswad and what he has done in this case, and have made it relevant, and for you all having us here. But I would like for you all to go to the Honey Brown Hope website and really get into this case. We have documented every step of the way what is going on with Darius' case, and where we are now is waiting for the special prosecutor out of Brazos County to do this investigation. And we need the media support and making sure that we keep this on the front page of everybody's mind in terms of Darius getting justice after 37 years of being incarcerated in prison, and probably 2 more years in jail.
No, I was gonna say, Tammy, he's been in since '83, so he's at the 39-year point.
39 years. Wow. Aswad, you went to the prison. You sat with Darius. Many, and I think Ms. Campbell just brought out a great point, but many inmates, many people who are locked up, just about all of them will tell you that they are innocent. You sat face to face with Darius on, I think, more than one occasion. You did a video interview with him, as well as several written interviews, stories. Your takeaway in your discussions with Darius, as Ms. Campbell said, even other inmates are saying, and I think I read it in one of your articles, he doesn't belong here. What as a journalist, what did you come away with?
The experience was both encouraging and heartbreaking at the same time. Encouraging at how this brother could be so, he just seemed so calm. I could not imagine being in his situation. But it was also just heartbreaking, the amount of years he'd been in. And, you know, just to humanize this case a little bit more, you got to remember, this was a young man who was a track star in the city of Chicago. He had offers from Ohio State, from Florida A&M. He told me he had track scholarship offers from 8 different institutions. He chose Texas Southern University at the recommendation of his high school track coach. And he told, and I'm thinking, man, I know you hate making that decision. He said, no, he said, I loved TSU. I loved my experience at Texas Southern. He said, I was a member of, you know, the frat Alpha Phi Alpha. You know, we did a whole lot of good things on campus. You know, he was married at the time when all this went down. I think his son was just born that same week. I mean, there's absolutely and he had no criminal record at all. So absolutely nothing adds up. But just to see how he maintained his positive outlook, I said, man, how are you so positive? He says, family, man, family. I talk to my brother just about every day. They've always had my back. They continue to fight for me. And so that was the encouraging part. But it's just heartbreaking. In fact, I asked him, I said, so he was initially placed in Harris County jail because of that whole credit card thing. I said, so you're in jail. You've never had trouble with the law. I'm thinking he's going out of his mind. I said, so how did you experience that? He said, I wasn't worried at all because I knew I didn't do it. And so I was thinking this is just a matter of time before I get out of here. And then they came back with a charge of murder, which, you know, has been eventually thrown out. But he said that's when I started to worry. And so I'm just hoping that this word gets out nationally and people, you know, like our good brother said, don't let folks sleep. But I would also like to see Texas Southern University step up. I would also like to see this brother's frat, the members of Alpha Phi Alpha, step up. The members who love to remind us that, Martin Luther King was a member, and, all the good work that they do. Well, this is another piece of good work that I believe they need to do.
Yeah. And let me go back to the journalist, Barrington. You heard, I saw 39 years. So initially we said 37. It doesn't, at this point, it doesn't even matter, right? I mean, 37, 38, 39 years taken from this young man's life for apparently no reason, as Aswad brought out, a track star, a college success story.
Yeah,
This is incredible, and we're talking murder charges that were thrown out. We're talking even the credit card fraud charges they mentioned were thrown out. Barrington, again, as you said, they shouldn't sleep. But Barrington, what else can be done at this point?
One of the things things have been going around in my head. I'm thinking, I don't know if it's been done. I'll be checking petitions. We need to have people calling Abbott's office every hour of every day, block him. They can't get no phone calls. Mm-hmm. There were things that work. There are actions, non-violent actions that work. We gotta spread the word, and we gotta let that judge. He needs to have people in his butt every day.
Judge Joshua Hill, by the way.
Judge Joshua Hill, because I'm thinking to myself that if the young brother has been in prison for 39 years, why do you need 6 months? Why do you need to give them 6 months to try to determine if he should be there? They've had all this time. But when it comes to our lives, it doesn't matter. They've stolen 39 years of this young man's life. Mm-hmm. And that just pisses me off.
Samuel Elam, obviously you speak with your brother probably often. Sam, is Samuel Elam still with us? No? Okay. So, he is. Sam, yes. How has he managed to stay encouraged all this time? I know it was mentioned that he gets the chance to speak with you and loved ones, but how has he really managed to stay encouraged? Because I'll tell you what, 39 years, 39 minutes, I would have been discouraged.
Well, I just think he's mentally strong, and like Aswad was saying, he has complete family support. Everybody comes down and sees him, throughout the year. He calls everyone. Everyone is, encouraging him. And, he is just a positive, strong individual. He always has been.
Yeah. And Samuel, break it down real briefly for us, if you will. All these years, 4 decades we're talking about now, going on 4 decades. What have you missed, and what have your brother missed?
Well, I mean, my brother and I are 11 months apart, so we grew up close. We missed everything. Being able to advise each other, share experiences, have family events together. It's 40 years is a lot of life. So yeah, we just missed the bond that would have gotten stronger, and the experiences that we would have shared over these last 40 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, Aswad, this is some great reporting. It's what's interesting is, and I haven't seen anybody else really report on Darius and the plight that he's been going through for these 40 years. Thanks to you, we're really getting some insight on a case that many have ignored. And why has that been the case?
I have no idea. That's what blows my mind. It literally blows my mind, because when I hear about other cases nationally, I'm like Barrington. I'm pissed off all over again. But when I heard this case, I was like, this is the same thing. This is the same level of injustice. And there's another case here in Houston involving a brother that was killed, Joshua Johnson. But and I know this isn't only a Houston thing. I know there are all kinds of other cases, but I'm just really hoping and praying that some national eyes get placed on this. And when you asked Samuel about his brother, and Darius just absolutely loves his brother and his entire family. When you asked him, like, what did he miss? I asked him that same question. I asked Darius that same question, and he talked about how heartbreaking it was that he wasn't there at his mother's funeral, because they had always talked about, how they're going to celebrate when he finally gets out. And that was one of the other things that he said kept him in a positive mind frame, that he continually visualizes the day that he is out. And he said that's one of the things that keeps him going, that keeps him positive.
Yeah, you think about 40 years, James, right? 40 years. So, computers wasn't even a thing, Microsoft wasn't around. At that time, what Reagan was starting his first term, or in the midst of his first term.
Right.
Internet is probably not even a word that they were even aware of. So much, James, and I know you, the historian, you be bringing out these little points that we don't even often think about. But 40 years, James, talk about those 40 years. What has happened in 40 years?
Well, Stacy, at the time that Darius was dealing with this foolishness, there was this brand new machine that people were getting hip to called the fax machine. And so things were just really, really different at that time. You talk about fingerprinting. Fingerprinting was very primitive at that time. If you had a fingerprint on some type of weapon, or in this case, a yellow legal pad, you were just automatically guilty. Why? Because you're on the finger. Your fingerprint was on the evidence. That's just how primitive things were. And now, fortunately, things have sped up to the point that we can do more analysis in regards to this. It was a different time. And as I alluded to earlier about Houston was a scary place for young black males in terms of the police, because they would just pull you over for anything. And if they just felt like you were being too belligerent by saying, "Excuse me, sir," they'll pull out a gun on you. That's something I know about. So the backdrop of this situation doesn't surprise me at all.
Wow. And so Barrington, so it all unfolded this way, according to the great reporting by Aswad. Being a good Samaritan, Darius gave a co-worker, Clarence Richardson, a ride home. While en route, they stopped at the Galleria, where Richardson used an altered credit card, unbeknownst, of course, to Darius, of Richard Boeing, who was found dead on May 7th, 1983, on Rice University's campus with a fatal gunshot wound to his head. So you have a situation where Darius was being a good Samaritan, and this is 40 years later, he's still paying for being a good Samaritan.
Yeah, I was reading through the material beforehand, and it struck me that the young man, the person, I don't know if he's a young man or not, the person who was killed is a white man. And in the South, and in most cases, if a black man kills a white man, you done. They're going to try and put you under the jail forever. So that to me is a critical part of this. The whole idea that if a white man dies, some black person got to pay.
Well,
because I was looking at some evidence, some research, and they were saying that black people are like 8 to 10 times more likely to be sentenced to death if it's a white person that they kill or that they're accused of killing versus anybody else.
Yeah, and real quick, Aswad, it's interesting because I know you mentioned that the Houston Police Department did receive a tip about a person the person who actually killed Richard Bowen. But here's the thing with that, right? It seems that when that happens, when you get evidence to say you got the wrong guy, especially after a conviction or while a trial is going, prosecutors and police seem loath to bring that new evidence to light.
I know.
It's so damaging. So talk about, just for a moment, we're running out of time, Aswad, but talk about that. They received the tip, and whatever happened to that tip, and whatever happened to the person.
So I learned this when I was interviewing Darius face to face at the prison, that like immediately following Bowen's murder, HPD received tips. They got a specific name of a person that Bowen had all kinds of dealings with, but they didn't follow it up. They didn't follow it up, but they had a name, and it wasn't just from one tip person. It was from multiple people. But like Barrington was saying, you know, the history is when they have a Black person in their sights, they just put the blinders on, and they just want to make sure. It's almost like the word picnic, right? Pick any Negro, and they're happy with that, and it's heartbreaking. The other thing that I asked him, I said, you know, your case is so crazy. Has any of these innocence projects, any of them, you know, picked it up? And he said he did work with one, but when he tried to contact others just to get more momentum, he said that they're real. He didn't use the word territorial. I guess they're respectful of, like, if one innocence project is working on a case, then the others won't also chime in. And so there really hasn't been a whole lot of movement there. But I just cannot understand why. When you just look at this objectively, it just makes sense that someone would say, we need to take a second look at this. And, you know, we were happy in May when we heard that the Harris County DA's office was unrecusing themselves so that they could take another look at this case. And, you know, the hope was, if they look at it and they find out that there's no evidence tying Darius to this case, he could be set free from prison. But then I'm sorry, go ahead.
No problem. Real quick though, why did they recuse themselves in the first place? Because
one of the persons that worked in the Harris County DA's office, this sister was the court appointed attorney for Darius Elam, but she barely worked on the case. And it was a new, Kim Ogg was the Harris County DA that was coming in, and she wanted to remove any appearance of possible impropriety. And so she said, well, we're just going to stay hands off. But through the work of the Honey Brown Hope Foundation and Tammy Lane Campbell and her daughter, Sharday Campbell, and that whole crew, they changed. They finally said, you know what, we need to look at this case. But they have received that setback that Ms. Campbell just told us about.
Stacy. Go
ahead, Barrington, real quick.
Kim Ong is a progressive. She is described as a progressive prosecutor. Them people down there don't want that, because they know that if she is as advertised, that she'll find a way to get him out. And I'm pretty sure that they don't want that, because the prosecutors always are talking about they have 100 wins and all that type of stuff. So it's about the numbers,
right?
And the cops have a quota of people that they pull, so it's about the numbers. They don't care about the human beings, the lives that they destroy.
Wow. Well, and this is why we have such a great team here with Barrington and James and Aswad. Everyone has some great input on this. Of course, Aswad did all the great reporting. Barrington is going to do some more from a national angle. Tammy Lane Campbell, just real quick, your closing thought on this. What do you want everyone to take away from this, Tammy?
To fight like hell until Darius get out. We have fought to try to get him out on parole. That hasn't been successful. We're going to have to continue to fight. We're going to have to keep our focus on that judge for Judge Joshua Hill in terms of stepping out of his lane. He cannot be the judge and the prosecutor at the same time. So we as a people have got to step up, speak up, and fight until Darius get out.
Yeah, absolutely. Tammy Lane Campbell of the Honey Brown Hope Foundation, and of course Samuel Elam. Want to hear your final thoughts as we close this morning on your brother and his case.
Well, something my brother always says is it's a very simple statement. He says, "Truth will triumph."
Truth will triumph, and it certainly should, if nothing else, right? Samuel, we really appreciate you. Our thoughts certainly will continue to be with you. As you heard, Barrington Salmon said he's going to pursue this. He's going to want to talk with you, and of course, Ms. Campbell and others around this case. And we know Aswad will continue to keep the pressure on locally. And so hopefully we'll be able to see you guys get the justice that you so deservedly seek. So thank everyone. Thank you all for joining this very special edition of Let It Be Known. Everyone have a safe and sound weekend, and stay masked up if you can. I tell you, this COVID is too much. Yeah. So we will see you on Monday.
Thank you.